Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Today, we are thrilled to welcome someone who has been a producer, a writer of several films, including this year's Deadly Justice. He's authored several books, including his latest, Creating a Character for the Stage or Life. He's a photographer and graffiti artist and has starred in both stage and screen, including the beloved sitcom Parker Lewis Can't Lose. And he's also currently, I believe, a fellow Floridian. Please help us welcome Corin Nemec. Corin, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, we all got excited.
You kind of grew up in the business in an artistic family. Your mom was a graphic designer. Your dad was a set designer. So did you get to go with your dad onto some of the sets that he worked on? Because I read that he worked on Goonies. So did you ever get a chance to go into that?
I wasn't around for Goonies. You know, I grew up in Georgia primarily up until the mid 80s when we moved to Los Angeles. My mom transferred with the company she was doing graphic design work for, the Nederlander Company, which owned the Pantages Theater, the Fox theaters all over the U.S. and, you know, a big play promotional company and owner of theaters, whatever. Anyway, so the sets I had gone on with him were like there's a movie called Hell of the West that was a big bicycling film back in the 80s. I forget if that was the final title for it, but I went on the set of V when he was doing set design for the TV series V. Mm-hmm. And a few other ones. I think there was another one that I think he was doing this one up in it was with John Belushi and someone else. I can't remember. It didn't do very well, but I went on that set.
1941.
What?
1941.
No, I love that movie. I would definitely remember the name of that one.
I was thinking Continental Divide.
Continental Divide, exactly.
Oh
yeah. So, you know, I was on some of the sets, not some of the more spicier movies that he was doing, but also I started acting professionally when I was 12, right. And my first set that I was on was the movie Tucker, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, playing Jeff Bridges' son, and so by the time, you know, my dad. His great successes as a production designer were really picking up steam at the same time that I was starting to act a lot professionally. So I didn't really have the need to be on his sets. I had my own sets to be on.
Yeah. So you came out. So you said you came out in the mid 80s. You came out to LA, right?
Yeah.
You know. I'm sure other actors resented you because people would come out and like you must have been one of those guys who was like, God, I've been out here a month and I don't have a series yet or whatever, you know, like boom, mid 80s and you're you're right there, man, playing the title character in a primetime show. Good for you.
Yeah, well, the series Parker Lewis started in 1990. Although I did do some other series work before that. I was on the series Webster when I was 14 or whatever, and did a pilot for a TV show with Soleil Moonfry called Cadets. I think Jenny Lewis might have been in that as well, had done a guest spot on Sidekicks and did a whole bunch of and did the TV pilot What's Alan Watching with Eddie Murphy Productions when I was 14, 15. You know, before even that was all before I Know My First Name Is Steven, which garnered me an Emmy nomination for dramatic performance. So in a way, I was more known for my comedic acting at that point when I got the job for I Know My First Name Is Steven, which was a really big win for me because I was more interested in the dramatic acting that I had been able to do, especially my experience working on the movie Tucker. You know, it was hard to top that. So after I did I Know My First Name Is Steven and got the Emmy and all that, then I ended up doing a big feature film called Solar Crisis with Jack Palance, Charlton Heston, Peter Boyle, Yeah, I mean, just a who's who of a cast. Tim Matheson, young Tim Matheson, playing my dad in that, and I had one of the lead roles in it as well. And director of The Vanishing Point, Richard Sarafian, directed it, which was just amazing to work with him too. But the movie flopped, but it was, it was an incredible experience to work
Sure.
on another film that was like it was like a $48 million budget back in the late 80s,
That's
which
huge.
would be equivalent to like 136 million today, you know.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to go back to, a lot of us did pilots, it's pilot season, and you do everyone, like, not everyone, but a lot of people would do a pilot. Don't you think it'd be an amazing idea if there was like a cable channel, or like I directed this theater where some of my old television writer friends, Cheers and some other shows, we put up something called the Dead Pilots Society, and we would do scripts of pilots that never sold. But I'd love to
Yeah.
see your Soleil Moon Frye, Eddie
Yeah,
Murphy
same.
pilot, and everybody
Well,
else.
the Eddie
There's all
Murphy
this
one
talent
came
out
out. That one aired. It was called What's Alan Watching? And it's got Fran Drescher, Peter Michael Getz, Barbara Barry, young Pauly Shore,
there.
and then it's got obviously Eddie Murphy is in it, and a whole host of other comedians doing little bit parts and stuff. Tommy Schlamme directed it. It was it was just an incredible project. So that one is available. You can actually watch that one. Another great pilot I did that never made it was one called Wilder that I did in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and it was about a washed up actor from a TV series who can't get a job, and he ends up moving in with his brother who's a cop, a police detective, and he tries to help his brother solve a crime, and he ends up getting his brother fired. But in the process, they actually do solve the crime, and they start a detective agency together. And it was called Wilder, and it was a great pilot, fantastic. I still have a VHS copy of it actually, and it didn't sell. It was a
Oh, that's
USA Network pilot.
That's too
They thought
bad.
that they
I
thought
love.
that we were too young. They thought that I mean, I was, even though I was in my I guess early, no, I was in my late 20s, maybe early 30s. I still looked like I was like in college. You know what I mean? So when they shot this whole thing and everything, when they tested it and everything, nobody really believed that I was old enough to have been this old school actor from back in the day when I was like, you know what I mean? I'm like too young to so
Well, I
so
Even
they
also want
now,
to.
ended up.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back to a
I was
couple
going to
of the
say,
names that you
go-
did you dropped. I did want to ask you about that. Like you mentioned Webster and you mentioned the Solar Crisis. I'm like, what's it? I mean, look at these legends that you already just named: Alex Harris, Susan Clark, Peter Boyle. Like, what's it like to you get to pick the brains at all about stories?
Yeah, man. Well, obviously it's I've always taken my job seriously, probably very seriously, I would say. And the experience of working with actors like that, especially Charlton Heston or any of them, just knowing. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with Donald Sutherland on a film, and Martin Sheen on a film, and obviously Ray Liotta and Danny Glover, and I mean, when I think back on it, if I go through, it's like it's crazy. All these different uh, it's just a crazy. I have to count all of my blessings because every single one of the really talented classic actors that I've had a chance to work with, the experience for me is just it's kind of I don't want to say outer body because it's cheesy and corny, but it's like I'm so sensitive to the greatness that I'm in front of, and so respectful to their space and their creative process. And I feel so blessed to be able to have the opportunity to share a stage with that kind of talent, and to be able to challenge myself as an actor. Can I compete? Am I able to deliver a character and a performance that somebody will watch and see that I'm not being mowed over by Jack Palance or by any of the other actors that I've worked with far more years of experience. I'm able to maintain right there with them, in the horse race, to the end of the end of the picture. But so, for me, what I learned mostly from them is, generally speaking, 99% of them have all been so focused and so passionate about what they're doing, no matter what their age range was. Even when, even with Charlton Heston, who was obviously even back then was quite old, and with the amount of work that he had done, my God, it's ridiculous. And to still see him, you know, uh, offset, getting himself psyched up for the scene, doing his whatever his preparation work is to get the energy level up to where it needs to be to deliver the dialogue, so it doesn't look like, you didn't just run down the beach, you know what I mean? Or you did just run down the beach rather than you didn't just run down the beach, or So I've always been impressed to see that these actors are just as passionate today as they were likely when they started, possibly even more so. Who knows?
Right.
And because I have worked on rare occasions with, with the actors who have it all and are doing fantastic and seem like they absolutely hate the job, or at least hate the current job they're working on, or whatever the case may be, and are just miserable on set, or maybe are miserable off set and bring that misery to set, whatever the case may be. For myself personally, being on set has become a home away from home, and in many respects, I'm actually at my most comfortable, my most relaxed, my most behaved when I am on set, or in the throes of a production. So
Yeah. Hey, listen, I mean, you're a really humble guy, and that's great, and stay that. But like you belong. I mean, when you're with Jeff Bridges and Charlton Heston and all that stuff, you were always, and I mean this, you were always like one of the, on the short list in my mind anyway, like the real deal guy. Like you were very natural. You're a good actor. But I have a question for you, Corin. So this is like a common thread question I ask other people I know who started young, like myself and like yourself. What was there was a moment in my life where I was very young. I started like I was a little kid, right? And I'm watching Jack Lemmon. I played Jack Lemmon's son, and
yeah, wow,
he
that's
was
rough.
he was talking, and it wasn't we weren't doing a scene together at the time, and we were in New York, but he was talking, and after a lot of dialogue, I realized he wasn't just talking. That was him acting. He was rehearsing a scene with Barbara Harris, and I didn't realize that I thought he was talking, like it was so natural, it was so real.
Yeah.
That's acting, you know what I mean? Something you learn on the spot and not in somebody's acting class or whatever, or with a parent running lines with you. It was like, oh
Yeah,
my
totally.
God, that was that. And then that clicked. Obviously something clicked for you at some point. Do you have something when you were young, a memory about that? Anything that brought you in?
You mean about just in terms of when I first started acting, when I was in eighth grade, when I was 12 years old, I started acting at Center Stage LA with Kevin McDermott. He was the artistic director there, and he utilized a lot of improvisation in his method to be able to loosen up young actors and get them not so focused on the script, and get more focused on the character and the behavior. It was very advanced. The way that he taught, though, was so easy to grasp as a young mind. Later in life, I realized just how thoroughly advanced his technique was, and how his technique would be most valuable to adult actors as well, especially ones who didn't start studying when they were really young and very open to things. And now there was a lot of actors like you probably know as well, that we grew up with, who were forced into being child actors, and although they were talented, their hearts weren't in it, because it wasn't their overall decision to be an actor. Whereas for me, it was 100% my choice. I was the guiding force behind it. I had the support of my family, but I had to be the one to be on top of things even at a very young age. Even my auditions, staying in touch with my agents and managers and all of that stuff, and that was also a factor in growing up relatively quickly, which I actually preferred, being in more of the adult oriented environments of the professional world than I did the house parties, you know what I mean, in
Yeah,
high
yeah.
school and
Yeah.
stuff. It was magical. And so I think that when I gravitated towards working with these really, really highly trained and uh, incredibly talented artists later on, as in my youth, that's what gave me the ability, was this ability to improv. So a quick note on that: Kevin McDermott, he would have us as young kids. His class only allowed 12 to 17-year-olds in the class, and when we would study a scene, he would have us, rehearse the whole scene, memorize it completely, and then he'd have us throw away the dialogue and just improv the scene, the needs and wants of the characters, beginning, middle, and end. And if you happen to say a line that was scripted, fine. If you didn't, no big deal. Don't worry about it, which was very uncomfortable to do at first, because we're so addicted as actors to be on script, to tell an actor after he's prepared a scene, okay, now forget all that dialogue and just behave and be the character. Some actors might not even be able to do it, even
Right.
well-trained ones.
Yeah.
So that allowed me at a young age to be loose enough,
Right.
and free enough, to be not anxiety ridden or stressed out about the performance.
Right. And then that's my point, is there some, the better actors, there was something that made them go, oh, and just love the process and love the art of it more than wanting to be famous or anything like that. Like they
Yeah,
love the
that's what it
art
was
of
for
it.
me. It was the character. It was the character development side of it. It was the pretending to be other people in other storylines that aren't my own, living other lives with other realities and other locations, and all of this it's a very magical, almost spiritual experience to let go of all of the pressures and BS from our own personal lives, and to be able to totally and completely embrace a life outside of ourselves. And if that life outside of ourselves that I'm performing in is far more stressful than my own, well, how even more magical is that I get to go in and play this terrible tragedy and come back to something that isn't so tragic. What a blessing,
Yeah.
to be able to
No
then look
kidding.
at my own life and go, wow, this is things are great. Life is great.
Yeah.
I could be in, that situation of that character in that
Well,
particular film, or,
just speaking of that, you just mentioned it. I mean, you get to be someone else that had more unfortunate. I mean, I want to just talk quickly about My Name is Steven, because I remember when that was out. I was like, it got
So
all this
good.
notoriety. It got all these. It was on the news all over. So he was like, a part in there, like in there. Did you speak to him at all about all the situation? What happened?
No, by the time I met Steven Sander the first time, we were already in production.
Uh-huh.
I worked with a wonderful acting teacher and classically trained actor, John Lenn, in the development of that of Steven Stainer, and everything I needed to know was in the script. I read some articles and stuff like that, but the script was so well written,
Yeah.
that it was all there. And even though it was a very high level of complexity for me at the time to understand the full arc of this character's life and the roller coaster there and everything that he went through, to really, really, really be able to understand it in my heart was obviously difficult. And I don't think that if they hadn't allowed me to work the script with John Lenn and work every single beat and moment, break down every single scene.
Mhm.
I mean, every single scene, break down what is happening to this character in this scene. Why is he uncomfortable? What does he want? Does he want to get out of this moment? Does he want to be in this moment? What's happening? If I hadn't done that intensive work with John Lenn, I think that performance would have turned out to be a disaster for me as an actor. Because it was such a roller coaster ride, and the shooting schedule was all over the place a little bit. So it wasn't that it was shot exactly in that order that you got to watch it, and having to, and there was so much emotional stuff going on, as Moosie, too. It's exhausting, having to show up and be upset all day long every day. So it was good for me also that I not only had that rehearsal time, but also that I had studied with Kevin and had that ability to improv, because it also helped me to disconnect very rapidly from the emotional condition of the character that I was playing. And it was like an on-off switch for me. And Larry Ellikin, the director of I Know My First Name is Steven, was constantly in an absolute panic, because I would be about to do a scene that was really, really heavy, really tough, very emotional. And I'd be, offset, like not hamming it up or anything, but having like a regular casual conversation with one of the grips or the guys, or, eating a donut with one of the Teamsters, or just behaving like a regular kid. And he'd be sitting there going, geez, this kid's got to cry in 5 minutes. What the, what's he doing over there? He could be in his room, like miserable, crawling around on the floor, thinking about the pet that died that he loved most, that kind of method BS, that actors can get sucked up into. And but for me, it was just, once I'm able to turn it on and embrace the reality of the character and the reality of the moment, the behavior has to be what it has to be. It can't be anything else other than what it is, because that's what's happening. So
What a layered character that you played, man, and like how complicated, and what a great, great role compared to so many surface shallow things. And I didn't know Larry Ellikin directed that. I worked with him a few times.
He's
And
great, isn't he?
when you were actually saying his words, like, impersonating him a little bit, it kind of sounded like,
If you want me to impersonate a Larry Ellikin, I mean, listen, Corky, come over here.
Totally.
Corky, listen,
Totally.
listen. And he's chewing on that cigar, and his beard and mustache is all yellow from just, decades of cigar smoke. He's like, now listen, you got to realize there's something heavy happening in this next scene, right? Are you ready for it?
Yeah. And with a
You ready for
total
it, kid?
typical like khaki vest that he wore constantly.
Always.
I did like 3 things with
He
the
wore-
guy. Yeah.
I'm sure he wore the exact same vest that he wore with you on the same movie I was on. I'm sure,
it
it was
smelled
like
just the
Einstein with
same.
that vest on. But I will say, because as you know too, that transition from being a child actor to young adult actor to adult actor, it's to navigate that is nearly impossible. You know what I mean?
Right.
To continue and to continue being successful at it, and to continue working consistently, as much as possible. And I've just been so absolutely blessed. And I really have to say that, there's a couple of things that I attribute the longevity to. One was that I never let one thing die. I never just did drama. I never just did comedy. When I was doing Parker Lewis on the hiatus, I didn't just do nothing and just sit back on my laurels and go, hey, I'm Parker Lewis. I made sure I did a dramatic TV movie every hiatus. So the first hiatus from season 1, I did a dramatic TV movie called For the Very First Time. Season 2, I did My Son Johnny with Rick Schroeder and Michelle Lee and all that. And then the end of season 3, which was unfortunately our last season, I did Life Force Experiment with Donald Sutherland. And that was, that really, really helped to keep people in, not only in the industry, but also in the viewing audience, at least aware enough that I couldn't end up being locked into, oh, this is just the only guy that he can be, the only character he can play. And then I was fortunate and blessed enough also to really not be overly concerned with the auditioning process. There was a short moment where I had a bit of an ego about the auditioning process during season 3, and I lost out on potentially a role of a lifetime. for Primal Fear, auditioning for that movie, and I totally blew the audition because I didn't feel that I should have to pre-read for it. I felt like I should be able to just go in with the director and producer and do my
Right.
audition, and I really made a bad choice with a very powerful casting director at the
Oh,
time,
wow.
and put her in an awkward position because the studio wanted her to pre audition people and get them ready for the callbacks. Not that it was just something that she was just doing because she just wanted to do that,
Yeah,
and here I kind of like was butting heads with that, and I went in and I didn't do the best pre-read performance that I could have done because I was sort of like and so when I did get the call back anyway, I walked in and it was one of the coldest rooms I'd ever walked in my life. They
Oof.
hated me in that room. And I knew that I was my own worst enemy in that moment in time, and I never let it happen again. That was the beginning and middle and end of being egotistical about the auditioning process. And then shortly after that was when I went up for the role of Harold Lauder in The Stand. And and again, just not being afraid to just go through the audition process, go in, read, read for everybody I had to read for, got and got that job. And same thing with Drop Zone. If it was such a small part, the amount of work that I had done leading up to taking on the role of Selkirk in Drop Zone, Wesley Snipes, uh, the other actors would have been like, dude, it's nothing. It's got like 3 lines of dialogue and he's in 5 scenes or whatever. But because I did a really, really unique, interesting improvisational audition because there wasn't a lot of dialogue for the character, they ended up creating more
Wow.
dialogue for the character and developing that character out and doing more with that character. And it went from, something that would have been like almost a nothing burger on screen to a very memorable role. And I attribute John Badham a lot to that because he saw something in the character that I brought to life that the film needed. You know what I mean? And then not too long after that, I went on to do Operation Dumbo Drop, and that's
Mhm.
and that was another great opportunity
Mhm.
for me to play with my comedic skills, again. And then from there just kept, continued doing the movies of the week, the dramatic stuff, and then me and David Faustino partnered
I'm
up
gonna
and
ask you
started
about that too, the David Faustino
producing.
one.
And
Yes.
well, me and him partnered up and
Yeah.
did Killer Bud together. We produced, we co-produced that, with them as well, and then we ended up doing we got a National Lampoon film off the ground, RoboDoc, that we co-produced with National Lampoon, and it was one of their last movies before the SEC violations. But and then David Faustino went on to do. We ended up co-producing another little film together called High Hopes, with Jay Muse and myself and Danny Trejo and a bunch of other great actors. And then we did we executive produced, created, and shot our own short-lived TV series called Starving in
Yeah.
2006 or so.
I enjoyed that one.
2007.
Yes.
Yeah, it was wild. It was something else. And and then we did a couple other things after that too. In fact, we just recently shot a movie down here in Florida together called Kid Detectives, a kids film. But so we still try to work together, but our dynamic duo attempt to really, get us as a notable comic duo. Yeah, well, as much as we tried all these films that we did together, the series, everything, we just never could get the one thing that like lit the
Uh,
fire, lit the fuse, and really got us
Right.
like to that next level of production where now we're doing, $6 to $13 million films instead of 800,000 to
right.
1.3,
Right. Hey, so I just wanted to say, like, just putting a button on back to Primal Fear. So it sounds like you put yourself behind the 8 ball. You recognized it as you got old, as you matured, and that, I mean, you're human. We all, made those mistakes. I threw an audition once, and and like you later you look back and you realize it was more than that audition. And wait, I could have been. She could have had you back for something else, down the road. Plus,
100%.
plus, you also realize that she wasn't just to weed people out, like you said. The studio was having her to get people ready
She was there
for
to help
now.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
She was
yeah.
there to help me, and I
I
blew it.
know. But good for you, man, for
An
being
idiot.
cognizant of what happened. Hey, I want to move
Right.
on to the possible pressures of. So you got a title role in a primetime series. You played Parker Lewis, right? You're the first on the call sheet. This is
Yeah.
your show. And so was there you're feeling pressure on that? Because you had to carry it and you did. But also as far as getting that role, is there anything outside of reading, callback, network, and then showing up? I mean, was there any kind of crazy audition process for you to get that show?
The crazy audition process was that there was no audition process. Clyde Phillips and and Lon Diamond were the creators of Parker Lewis, but they had created Parker Lewis for CBS during the time period that I was shooting What's Alan Watching for CBS. So they were creating Parker Lewis before the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off ever came out.
Oh, really?
But CBS turned down the show, and the rights reverted back to Clyde and Lon. And then a couple of years later, after the success of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and then Fox launches their new lineup for their new lineup of shows that they want to do, and they got the chance to pitch Parker Lewis to them. And because of the success of Ferris Bueller, they loved the idea of Parker Lewis, especially with the idea that they were going to shoot it like a film, meaning a single camera. It's not going to be a half-hour multi-camera show, and it was going to be done in the vein of the movie 3 O'clock High, if cinematically. And Clyde was a huge fan of What's Alan Watching. He could not believe that What's Alan Watching didn't get picked up and all this stuff. And he just thought that I did a great job as this quirky character, as the lead with all of these huge stars and all this. And I held the show. And he wanted me if they were going to give him a go ahead at CBS, since I was already at CBS with What's Alan Watching, he wanted to attach me to it right away if CBS picked it up, and they didn't. But so then years later, I get the Emmy nomination for I Know My First Name is Steven, and then I did the other film, the Solar Crisis movie, and everything, which did flop in the theaters. But still, I thought that I was really off to the races as far as my career in film went. I thought that movie was going to be a really big hit. So when they had asked me if I was interested in doing Parker Lewis, I said no, and that was only because my experience shooting Webster as a multi-camera sitcom was very difficult. The pacing and the line joke thing, and having to get, it wasn't organic to me. It wasn't, I couldn't really find it. It was a miserable experience too, working with Alex Karras and whatever her name was. They were absolute miserable people.
Oh,
They
really?
were terrible to be with. It was so I just didn't. I was not interested in getting back into especially a half-hour series, and so I think that my aversion to doing it is what got me the offer, without having to audition.
Yeah.
And they finally, Clyde and Lon and Robert Lloyd Lewis, they brought me in to at least have a meeting about it and tell me what they were trying to do, because I was a huge fan of the movie 3 O'clock High, in actuality. And so when they explained that this wasn't going to be a half-hour sitcom, that this was, a single camera shot like a film in the vein of 3 O'clock High, using the camera almost like a character in it, I was like, what? You guys are going to do that? Of course I want to be a part of this. And so they made me the offer. I accepted it, and then I ended up, I auditioned for it in the sense that I read with all of the other actors who were coming in and auditioning for all the other roles. And so if at any moment they had felt like, yeesh, Corin Nemec was a terrible choice for Parker Lewis, they would have had ample time to have, got me out of there during that side of it. But I never had to audition for the role of Parker Lewis.
Okay.
Which was,
and are you sure you feel that way about multicam sitcoms? Because here comes that kooky neighbor. I'm with you on that. Real quick, so I remember watching the show back when it was on live, like first runs, because I grew up knowing Billy Jane or Jacoby at the the whole
Yeah.
family. But this morning, knowing you were coming on, I just wanted to refresh myself, so I picked a random episode, right? And I noticed that one of the young girl characters comes into the principal's office, and the principal says something like, "Well, what's your last name?" And it was Nemec.
Oh,
In the show, in the script, she said Nemec.
right.
And then you say, and Parker says Nemec or something like that. And I'm like,
Huh.
obviously an Easter egg.
Right.
So
Yeah.
were there plenty of those because the creators and you were tight and all that stuff, or do you remember?
I mean, the creators we got along very well, but the writer's nest was almost not an off limits space, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was their world, and they didn't need any of our input as to what the show may or may not need.
Okay.
What our task was to do was to memorize literally verbatim every single line of that's in the script. We were not allowed to change
Any
an if
beats.
to an of or this or that. I mean, you had to be exactly on task.
Absolutely.
And if you weren't, they would definitely, which I pretty much always was. I mean, 100%. But after it went on for a while, there was a couple of slackers here and there, who weren't coming in quite as prepared as they might should have, and it was a very short time before the producers were down on set, making sure that everybody kept it together and was like, listen, come on, we got, because the shooting schedule was so difficult. It was a very tough shoot, with the all the camera angles and the difficulty in the shooting style that added probably 4 to 6 hours a day to our schedule alone, just these crazy camera stuff. So it was costing for our half hour show, it was costing us as much as 90210. That was an hour drama with twice the cast members, and it was costing the same amount of money per episode.
There were things that I just read now that went over my head at the time, that the Easter eggs, the things like signs in the background, thank you for not watching Erie, Indiana, who you were up against.
Yeah.
And I see you
Yeah.
interact with Tim Stack on social media. Do you keep in touch with anyone else from the show?
Troy Slayton and Abraham Ben Ruby. So Jerry and Kubiak. Yeah, I in fact, not too long ago, they flew us all over to Paris for a Parker Lewis reunion, because Parker Lewis was a phenomenon over in some parts of Europe, but especially France. It played in rotation for numerous generations, over there. And so they flew myself, Billy Jane, Troy Slayton, Abraham Ben Ruby, and Maya Bruton, who played my sister. They brought us all over there for a big reunion at Paris Comic-Con Paris, or whatever it is. And it was a great time. But
you now this makes sense. You were just talking about the budget restraints of that show or whatever at the time, but I think you were one of the first shows that had a Save This Series campaign, when you're trying to get the network to like bring back after maybe it's been released after 3 seasons or whatever, which is a huge compliment. It's never, in my opinion, it's never a dig. It's the people who count talking to the people in the suits, hey, we got the real thing here. Well, why are you taking it away from us now? So that was pretty cool though. I mean, you had the public rallying.
Yeah, absolutely. It was more of a success than the network understood, because they were still basing their knowledge of how well their shows were doing on the Nielsen ratings and the Nielsen boxes, which by the early 90s, most households had 2 televisions,
Right.
one for the kids, one for the adults in their houses. And the Nielsen boxes are connected to the adults' television sets, not the kids. And also, there's no Nielsen boxes in college. Parker Lewis was a massive, just crazy hit. In dorms, they would have dorm parties to watch the next episode of Parker Lewis on Sundays. It was nuts. And so they really didn't know how successful the show was. It was unfortunate that they canceled
Yeah.
it, but like I said, I mean, I've been able to just continue working, and moving forward with my career. And another reason I attribute the longevity of my life is to studying with Manu Tupou at the American Repertory Company from
Oh,
1994 to 2005. Was getting back into an acting class because I had been in acting classes from age 11 until I was 19. And I got so busy with Parker Lewis at 19 that I stopped being in acting classes. And so those number of years later, when I was 23, 24 years old, I was like kind of lost as an artist in many ways. I was trapped between this persona that was sort of created for me in the media or in trades or in Hollywood, and then who I really was trying to be as an artist. And it was studying with Manu that brought me right back down to ground level again, and made me realize that I can never be guaranteed a career or success in this industry. All I can be guaranteed is that if I enjoy acting, I can find opportunities to act, whether it be on stage or whatever it is. And if I'm not passionate enough to live the pauper's life in order to do what it is I love to do, then I need to stop doing it,
let's talk about that,
So
because
that
you wrote a
willingness
book
also.
based on your learnings with him. So how did that book come about?
Well, the book came about mainly, I mean, I've just, his method, the New Era acting technique, which was a very spiritual approach to acting, it not only really saved my career, I think, in many ways, but it also saved my life in many ways, because it was such a practical and spiritual methodology that he came up with, that insisted that our personality, our own personal character that we believe that we are every single day, is a lie. And that was when he first told me that. It was a tough one to get around for a moment, because it's a Buddhistic thing. Personality is something that we have. It's something that we can mold and manipulate, or it's something that we can become, and we can be trapped in it and never be able to get out of it. It's like somebody that you meet in life who is just who they are. They have their accent, they have their name, they have their history. And if you try to get them to behave outside of that fixed character, it's impossible, literally impossible, for them to break the character that they've become essentially addicted to, in order to transform and to put on the identity of someone else. And it was a number of years of that. And then I started studying at the Taoist Institute of Los Angeles to get a little bit more of an understanding of what is this Buddhist thing? What is this concept of of the division between the spirit, the mind, the soul and the body? What is this, quadplex that I'm dealing with and all, so that's really what very much saved me, because I had a moment where I was in his class where I realized I don't even have to be me. I don't have to be me anymore. I just have to be kind, be generous, be thoughtful, and be aware and be present. But I don't have to be fixated on who am I, because that's a fiction. If it appears outwardly that I have a personality, I call that the soulful, natural expression of self. If it comes across melodically, it's because I'm freed up creatively, aesthetically, and spiritually to be able to behave as just who I am. And that's why I can put on a little bit of a different accent every now and then, or, suddenly become the New York tough guy, or this, that, or whatever the case may be, because I'm not trapped in my own. And you see that with a lot of actors that we all love and appreciate over time. Unfortunately, I'll call them out. Your Robert De Niro's, your Al Pacino's, these guys who over time they could only play the one guy. That's all you're going to get. No matter what you cast them as, that's what you're going to get. You know what I mean? You're not going to get a different cadence to their voice. You're not going to get different mannerisms. You're not going to get a Dustin Hoffman going, in Rain Man in comparison to Running Man or Marathon Man. You know what I'm saying? So that was a part of it too that really, really allowed me to take more of that spiritual journey, which then also, it was his telling me that if you think you're an actor in life, if you're running around the world telling people that you're an actor and you're not acting, then you're insane. You're delusional. You're living a fantasy. The fantasy may work for you. Hell, you may even get a job out of the fantasy, but it's still a fantasy. You're only an actor when you're acting or when you're preparing for a role to perform and you're rehearsing. Otherwise, you're not an actor. You're whatever else you're doing. If you're gardening, you're a gardener. If you're cooking, you're a cook.
Yep.
If you're driving, you're a driver. You know what I mean? So it was that also allowed me to realize I can't sit here and look at these smaller films, these smaller budget movies, these what's called B movies to people, and go, I'm not willing to do that. It's an opportunity for me to test myself and to become a character and to act and engage in what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. If I say I'm an actor. If I say I'm an actor and I'm not acting, then I'm not an actor. I'm just delusional. So, that also propelled me to be willing to accept roles that I normally wouldn't have accepted because of the budget of the film or the script. But then I realized, hey, if the script isn't that great, what can I do to make it better, or at least my part better, or can I leverage my talent to become a producer on the project, and then we can rewrite the script and make the whole thing better.
That is so damn insightful, Corin. I'm telling you, like that is, for sharing that is pretty cool, because a lot of people need to a lot of people don't get that cupboard open to look at what you just said and hear what you just said. One of my favorite actors, I don't know about you, but you were talking about people who get trapped in the De Niro. It's weird to criticize Robert De Niro because he is an outstanding actor, but you're right. He's kind of De Niro in everything. One of my favorite actors is Sarah Paulson, and I feel like she subscribes to what you're saying. Like she is a chameleon, and even there's definitely a few others to name there, but that's really awesome that you're aware of that. And that and makes you a better actor. Switch gears real quick to something probably a little more shallow, but it amuses me when sci-fi fans argue with other sci-fi fans. And I know you did Stargate, right? So like, do you ever is that just an eye roller for you, or do you ever get into it? Like, no, because I have news for people. These aren't true stories, And they get so caught up into it,
I dig it, because if they didn't get caught up into it, then I wouldn't be able to travel the world and do these conventions and do appearances for Jonas Quinn, who was such a short-lived character for such a long lasting series, to be so well received and still so well liked by the overall audience, and to be appreciated. It's really great. I love it. I wouldn't look back on it at all. And again, even leading up to today, that willingness to, to branch out, to start writing, start producing, get out there and find my own money for a film. We just released one recently that was the first movie that I produced, that I'm the one who wrangled the financing for.
That's Deadly Justice.
It wasn't my own personal money, of course. That was Deadly Justice, yeah. And although it didn't end up on Lifetime, which was strange because that's who we made it for, it turned out really well, and I think that it was well received. And if you realize that we made that movie for $180,000, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a miracle of producing. That it turned out as well as it did.
It is available on streaming. I'll remind viewers that it is available now.
Yeah, and then
yes.
Yeah, and and willingness to just keep working. I just had a movie come out last night, Couples Retreat Murder on Lifetime. It's not, I don't play the lead or anything, but it's a supporting role. It was a lot of fun. I get to work with producers that I've worked with quite a bit over the years, and it's an opportunity for me to engage and to be a part of what it is that I do for a living. But the big one that's coming up, just real quick, is on August 23rd is Place of Bones, that's coming out, where I star opposite Heather Graham and Tom Hopper, and that's a Western directed by Audrey Cummings. And it's a thriller. I'm not going to give away really anything on it. You can go and find the trailer, no problem, called Place of Bones. Easy to find right now. Incredible trailer. Quentin Tarantino's one of his cinematographers, shot it. It looks incredible. It's superbly written, and I have finally, after all these years, a legitimate starring lead opposite role of a real A-lister like Heather Graham,
That's awesome.
and with Tom Hopper in it, and it's a performance that I could not be more proud of, and could not be more excited for people to get to see. So everybody look out for that,
Well,
especially.
we'd love to have you back and discuss it when the time comes with you, if you're willing to come back.
Yeah, let's get it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. It really was a pleasure getting to talk to you.
Hey,
Yeah,
man.
you bet, brothers.
So again,
I'll email you my info so we can stay in touch. My
You got
regular
it.
info
All right.
off the email.
You're not like other actors.
Yeah.
You're a good one, man. You're a good one.
Thanks, Moosie. So are you, brother.
All right, man.
So are you.
Oh, yeah, this is
Thanks.
Pop
Thanks a lot
Culture
for coming.
Retro.
Love you guys, man.
I'm Jonathan
See you, brother.
Rosen with Moosie Drier. And again, very special thanks to Corin Nemec. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.